we have just to face the reality. Dolby Atmos is the thing of today, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, So one of my focuses in whatever I'm doing with my plugins and everything is just to do something that works a little bit timeless, because the Ambisonics tech has been here for 60 years. And when it was born, it was way ahead of what computers could do, if there was ever a computer. So it was abandoned. But the truth is that Ambisonics is channel agnostic. So you can have one channel, you can have 16, you can have 100 channels. It all goes, it all works.
Yeah.
So right now I have like the decoder that decodes for Dolby Atmos. And then I guess that when there is the new thing coming, you will be able to decode your Ambisonics into that new thing. And that is the beautiful thing about the Ambisonics technology.
So welcome everybody. This is the first official episode of the Spatial Audio Monthly podcast. I'm Michael Wagner, I'm your host, and with me is my co-host Sam Hocking, next to me here somewhere. Hello. And this is our first official episode, and in our first official episode we also have our first guest, and our first guest is Alejandro from Audio Brewers. Alejandro, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's such a pleasure and such an honor to be here. I'm super excited to be part of this podcast, especially because it's the first official episode. My name is Alejandro. I am the founder of Audio Brewers. We are a company that specializes in virtual instruments and plugins that work natively in Ambisonics. We have been in the market for 3 years, and well, we are closing our 30-year anniversary this week, and we're super excited about it.
Excellent.
Well, welcome, and I'm very excited to have you on board, because you are bringing up a new plugin. By the time we are recording this is not yet out, but by the time this is going online, actually, the plugin will be available. And you have gracefully donated 10 licenses to your new plugin. So we are going to have our first giveaway. And there are going to be rules to that giveaway, and we're going to talk about those rules a little bit later when we talk about all kinds of things with Audio Brewers. So for those of you who are kind of watching this, you need to stick around in order to know how to actually get your plugin. But it's a very cool plugin, and I'm looking forward to kind of talking about that. Okie dokie. Awesome. So let's have a brief recap to our pilot. Our pilot episode was pretty well received, Stem, wouldn't you say?
I think so. Yeah, I've even got some work off of it. So, that's always a bonus, isn't it? Obviously, they're only taking up my offer of the free remixing service for the first customer, but I still count that as business. So
yeah, I thought that was kind of risky. Kind of
I didn't get overloaded. I was fine.
It didn't have that many, but kind of we had quite a few viewers on YouTube for a podcast, right? So especially for our first episode. Now the one thing that people liked was the name, so we're going to stick with Spatial Audio Monthly, and as I would call it, the Sam Show. I think that ended up being a really, really good name. So
sounds good.
So let's hope we can do that every month. Time flies by. We kind of yesterday were talking about wasn't it like yesterday that we recorded the pilot that we already
after 40 a month is basically 2 weeks, isn't it? So that's what it feels like. It never used to be this quick when I was 20. So
yeah, that's true.
Before you know it, you're around to a month again. But that's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's that is very true. I'm in my mid-50s. What can I say? It's kind of even faster than that. I'm
1.5 weeks for you then.
1.5 weeks, right? Okay. So before we kind of talk to Alejandro, and Alejandro, you're kind of welcome to kind of chime in if you want. We wanted to talk about a couple of new plugins and developments in the spatial audio space. Sam, take us away. What are the things that are new?
There's three key things that I've noticed which have interested me. There are more, but I think because we've got a guest as well, we'll just highlight a couple. The main one is if anybody's trialed any of the early access to GPU Audio's kind of VST offers with mainly convolution based and a couple of effects. So that GPU audio are kind of pushing the DSP processing from the CPU to the GPU. It ideally suits itself, it seems, to convolution based processing. I mean, Alejandro, I'm sure, knows a lot more about this than I do. I only use it as a kind of music user, really, rather than a developer or anything. But essentially, it offloads several. Well, I was easily processing several hundred tracks with obviously several hundred convolution reverbs on each one, and it doesn't really affect latency, which probably would increase on a CPU. And I think the first commercial release seems to be Vienna Mer Pro 3D with I think it's an add-on, relatively expensive, called Vienna Powerhouse, which is obviously a library of convolution reverbs for spatial audio. I think it's only sort of channel based and Atmos. I'm not sure if it's ambisonics or not. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I've downloaded it, but it's quite a monster install.
It is quite expensive, isn't it? It's sort of
only
for the
trial. I was only going to do the demo, but
but I was kind of wondering, because I never GPU based rendering is something that I never. I mean, having my background in computer graphics, obviously, kind of that's something that we do constantly. But I never felt that it is particularly useful in audio. But apparently there are applications, and I was just. Kind of, if you need to parallelize essentially the process, or you need to be able to parallelize the process, which you usually can't do with audio. But there are certain applications, and reverb certainly is one of them. But I actually would like to ask Alejandro, because isn't it in ambisonics? Couldn't you parallelize certain things in ambisonics?
Well, let me start by saying that Vienna, they're a very important company when it comes to virtual instruments. They've been in the market for so many years. I remember there for when I was doing my virtual instruments back in my day. They have initially they have released a convolution reverb that works with ambisonics impulse responses. I think they joined. I don't know if they joined forces, or if they got some info, or if they got a little bit of non-proprietary, because it's open source, but from IEM to do this convolution reverb. I'm not sure if the GPU audio thing is ambisonics based. But I have seen that the output is channel based. It is a very interesting thing when it comes to GPU, because a GPU has like so many cores in it, that can just do, like redundant things, and it could perhaps, offload some of the work for the CPU. But I have always wondered how it affects the latency when it comes to communicating the processor with the GPU. I haven't used it, so I have no idea, but you have used it. I don't know if it works well when it comes to live, to real-time stuff.
It's obviously, it definitely suits itself to some things, and you can just tell by the style of plugins that GPU Audio themselves released on their early access program. It's very much convolution, filters, things that can, obviously process many instances in parallel, I guess. Through the GPU. But I think the Vienna or the Vienna Powerhouse, as they're calling it, I think it's something like 1,700 convolution impulses processing in parallel at once. So it's not like I don't know what a standard convolution reverb is, but it's only one or two channels, maybe four channels, isn't it? A lot of the time, I think, of WAV audio or whatever.
I think for the convolution software that they did that works in ambisonics, they were using like first order ambisonics impulse responses that were upscaled to third order, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but anyway, just looking at the numbers when you scale it, it's kind of wow. That's a lot of convolutions to be processing, and not, I assume, not adding a huge amount of latency to the signal chain. So, so unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to test it this week, but I will do. But if it's anything like the early access from GPU Audio, I guess you're getting down the kind of path of almost real time room modeling at a much kind of higher resolution, possibly. I'm not sure. On the DSP side of it, but I think the idea is from GP Audio themselves is they're building an SDK for plugin developers, and then obviously I assume they're going to license the SDK to plugin developers to offload whatever processing they can to the GPU rather than
that would be
the CPU. So
for
something like
next step.
Yeah, for something like a massive kind of room modeler or reverbs, I guess that's kind of where you could say, well, we can really push the resolution extremely high because your DAW is not going to get bogged down by the plugin processing. But yeah, it's in theory it sounds good.
When it comes to parallelizing ambisonics,
yeah.
When it comes to parallelizing ambisonics, I'm not sure how easy it is depending on the approach, because as opposed to channel-based audio where you have like discrete channels, you can do like left channel and right channel at the same time. They're independent from each other, and then you can just bleed one to the other, and it will just work fine. In ambisonics, every channel needs the other channel in order to just create a channel. So I'm not sure how you could parallelize this type of thing. Yeah,
but you do need to do a lot of matrix transformation, matrix multiplications, right? So that there should be something in there that can be parallelized, right?
Yeah, I guess that could be. Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah, from what I understand, because I have spoken to his name escapes me at the moment. Well, the CEO of GP Audio, I have had a chat with him before about a similar thing, and I think the idea is their developers are creating the algorithms so that essentially you don't have to worry about how you're processing your side through the GPU. It's going to kind of be an API, I guess. Almost like it does
it automatically without you having to worry about anything.
I think an element of that to it, yeah. But it'd be interesting what sort of range of effects can be processed that way. Because a lot of effects don't actually take a huge amount of even CPU, like a basic EQ or a filter or something like that. But yeah, obviously if you're 1,000 convolutions is
convolution reverb is probably the perfect example, and there's no surprise that the first commercial application kind of uses that type of thing.
Yeah. So that's incredible. Quite an interesting one, and I think it's a 30-day trial. So if you're interested in that, definitely. I'm not sure if the GPU Audio early access plugins are still available. I assume they are, but So that was the first plugin that really caught my eye. Was it this week it got released? Maybe last week. I can't remember. Then
have you tried any of their plugins?
I only as demos. There's quite commercial sort of end of the plugin market they cater for, isn't it? I've never really seen a need for it. I can see for maybe film and for if you're doing big orchestral arrangements and stuff like that, I can see where it's very powerful. But have you used it, Alejandro?
No, I have not. But I'm very interested because for ambisonics, you definitely need a lot of processor power. Like I have noticed that right now, I'm developing my plugins for 7th order ambisonics, and it takes a huge lot of CPU to do the whole processing. So it could be very interesting.
And with a new Reaper version, you could actually go up to 10th order, right?
Yeah, but come on, that's an overkill, I think. I think 7th order is already an overkill for most applications.
Well, interestingly enough, I had a conversation with one of my first students today, actually, and they are in Vienna. Everything that we're talking about currently kind of takes place in Vienna, I guess, because IEM is Austrian, and kind of there are a couple of things that are Austrian here, but they are building a big immersive audio space with a 192 speaker system, and they were looking into kind of creating these types of decoders. And I think I honestly have no clue, because that's something I don't know. But if you get up to that level, I think 10th order might actually already start making a difference, right? Or can you stick with 7th order?
Well, look, the rule of thumb for ambisonics is like you should have at least the amount of speakers that you have channels in the order. So for 7th order is 64 channels.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're gonna have more than 64 channels, I guess a higher order. But this is like for crazy big applications.
So
I would say
things are coming. Things are coming, and I guess with the mathematics behind it, I do believe that GPU-based kind of calculations might actually make sense at that level if you're kind of starting to use that many channels.
Yeah. I think it's they've worked on the Apple Silicon as well now. So I think it's not even going to be an NVIDIA or
nice
specific thing. So I'm not sure how far down they are on the Apple path, but So
would be cool. That would be cool.
Which is kind of almost the path that Apple are taking as well. It's that they are blurring the line between what's a GPU and what is a CPU in some ways.
That was their main thing, and I remember at the very beginning where everybody laughed at that, but now they knew what they were getting into, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. No. And on the convolution side again, there was Fabfilter R2 released this month, which is the next version of pretty standard piece of kit, and I guess a lot of studios plug in. It's moved from stereo to multi-channel / Atmos. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a ambisonics side to it, which they could take a leaf out of Alejandro's book on that, I think, because you support ambisonics and multi-channel / Atmos beds. So I don't know why everyone just doesn't include ambisonics. I guess there's a complication.
I can tell you why,
of it.
because you have to start from the scratch. I mean, when you're doing channel-based audio, you just repeat the algorithm in each channel. In ambisonics, it's not like that at all.
Gotcha.
So you have to start from the scratch, all your engineering.
We had this discussion in our Discord. And by the way, for those of you who are listening, you can always join our Discord. I'm going to, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to leave a link in the description. But on our Discord, we had this discussion about essentially rotations of higher order ambisonics. And in principle, it is very, very simple, but actually kind of the mathematics behind it, once you get down to actually implementing it, the code is not that trivial. So it does require a little bit of knowledge on how things work.
So other than the sort of immersive support side of it, it also allows you to import an impulse response yourself, and it analyzes the convolution or the impulse response rather, and essentially turns it into an algorithmic reverb, which is quite cool, and it maintains the multi-channel support as well. So that's quite cool. So like I've got a lot of convolutions I use with Bitwig, which has got a convolution device as part of the.
Did you manage to test that out?
Yeah. I can take all of my stereo convolution effects from Bitwig. I think they store them in a not a proprietary form, but they kind of wrap it in I think a Bitwig preset extension or something. But it's essentially just a normal convolution underneath. So you can take any of your favorite stereo convolutions and convert them into a multi-channel. So that's quite useful. Which is the main feature of it for me was I'm not sure if it could model, like you can use impulse responses, a guitar cabinet or something like that. I don't know whether it can be used as a kind of physical modeler sort of thing.
And that upmixes in a useful way, because that's the thing that I'm kind of curious about.
I think it's probably coming back to what Alejandro was saying, where at a certain extent it's just repeating it to be multi-channel, but it's still got all the controls of moving things forward and back in the room and time delay. I guess there's some filtering in there as well to kind of emulate distance or whatever. I'm not sure on reflections. But I've never, as far as I'm aware, there's no other tool I know of that converts an impulse response into an algorithm alternative or equivalent rather.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's a mathematical process that's been done before, but not in a plugin as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, it was quite interesting, because when the first reviews of the Fabfilter came out, people said, well, there's nothing particularly new and that's a lot of money for nothing else. And then actually there were a couple of very well-known plugin reviewers who actually had to put out a second video kind of saying, hey, wait a moment,
Yeah.
there's actually something.
There's actually this, yeah.
There's actually something really kind of interesting in here. And it's actually not that expensive. Around the same time, Eventide came out with their reverb, and they kind of tried to sell it for $500, but apparently nobody bought it because it's already down to 200. But it's kind of really nice to see that Fabfilter kind of did that, because I think they did the right thing. Essentially, they're moving into that space without essentially charging an arm and a leg.
Yeah. Well, I think, the main Atmos, or the whole Atmos sort of engineering industry is quite a high end kind of industry still, where just the fact to build the 12 or 16 channel speaker studio that rules out quite a lot of people, hobbyists and home studios and even small studios. If you don't have that sort of work being requested from you, there's no point in investing in that equipment or the plugins either. But yeah, no, fantastic to see that they're I think everything that could be kind of multi-channel, they're probably releasing in multi-channel formats now. Obviously not. They haven't. I don't think they're interested in like the spreading instances of, say, a compressor across all the Atmos objects as a Hornet sort of thing. But certainly the standalone plugins that can be multi-channel, like Reverb, they're.
I mean, most of the plugins were multi-channel already, but not like 16 channels. So kind of, I forgot how many channels they supported, but I think it was like 8, something like that.
The Reverb maybe?
No, actually, most. I have to double check, but some of the plugins were already multi-channel capable, but nobody really used it for that purpose.
Yeah, right. Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, but I think that has to do as well because of what we said before, that is just the algorithm being repeated again. Like if I am, for example, using a multi-channel compressor, I perhaps don't want to compress all the channels equally. I want to go my center in a way, my left and right in another way. And if they don't offer you that option, then you just don't use it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, they didn't have a per channel kind of fine tuning. So essentially, it was everything the same way.
So definitely something to explore, I think, especially on the...
It's the equivalent to the multi-mono that Pro Tool has, I think.
Yeah. And I think there's Logic. I think Logic has got a similar feature as well, maybe, where multi-instance, but it's essentially just a repeat of what you've already got.
It's just a mono,
AU
16
format.
times.
Is it not AU format? Yeah. It's up to you whether how you want to control that after, if you can get at the multiple channel. That was the only thing that I did notice about the Fabfilter there. I think it's partly a VST3 thing, is that it's completely under control of the DAW. So if the DAW's saying, I've only got 2 channels, you can only use it as 2 channels. You can't get at it in like a multi-out way, which I always get a bit upset with that, because just because you are in you don't necessarily, if you're only feeding, say, a stereo input, there's no reason why you can't still use it as a multi-out reverb, because you can just route those channels to where you need them to go in your DAW anyway. So I always think it's a bit of a shame that that seems to be the growing trend, is that they let the DAW say how many channels it should set itself up as, and there's no way to override it.
Yeah.
The Liquid Sonics are the same. They don't really let you. You have to wrap it in Pog Bejeweled to get all the channels if you're not in a DAW with that many channels on the track or the effect bus or whatever.
And anyway, we can actually that is a kind of a problem, and we can actually talk about that a little bit more, because that is a problem that Alejandro ran into with Studio One, right? Kind of the dot trying to take control of the channel layout.
Studio One is one of the DAWs I have run into with that problem. Trust me.
So we're going to kind of talk about that later on, but but that is a whole thing.
Easy. It seems easy as a end user, but I'm sure to actually get it seamless. Well, I'm sure Alejandro's going to talk about that, but I don't envy you.
Yeah. It's as you said, it's in the way the VST3 specifications are written, right? So
yeah, but I think partly it's me trying to bend the plugins into a DAW that is only stereo as well, which probably is not what they're really developing for, to be honest. So, Plug Bejewel rescues me a lot of the time, so it's all good. Only one other thing, and that was the Google / Samsung
codec, right? So you wanted to talk about that. What's that about? I didn't have much chance to look at that yet. What exactly is that?
I think it might even be 2 years ago now. There was I don't know whether it was a leak or a leak that's done on purpose to see what the response is like. But there was Google Caviar was discussed, which was essentially announced as like an alternative to take on Dolby Atmos, or a format basically. So they're calling it the immersive audio model and formats, IAMF. So it's obviously, I think it's, from what I remember of the original kind of leak as it was essentially a free open source audio model for immersive audio. And I assume where Samsung come into it is because it's essentially license free or free. They can put it all into all their lower tier Android devices without obviously the cost of paying Dolby for a decoder. It's agnostic for the codec that it can use. I assume as long as the codec itself supports multiple channels, you can use whatever codec you want. So it's not really a codec; it's a model, a bit like an ADM, I guess, in some ways. It's kind of that level of format, and then that's part of the Alliance for Open Media group, which is a group of, I think Apple are on the kind of on the panel of it, but it's made up of Samsung, Google, Apple, various manufacturers.
Yeah, I always found it curious that much of this technology is so much heavily guarded. Kind of people constantly ask me to kind of talk about Sony's Real Audio, but it's just a nightmare to get started with that. It's essentially, you can't really do anything before you. No. The first thing you need to do is you need to shell out $500 in order to get anywhere. And even honestly, even MPEG-H, kind of the fact that you need to actually ask Fraunhofer for permission to allow you to use
download it,
is one of those things that is weird. So my hope is at some point somebody will come up with something that is actually really easily accessible, right?
Yeah, well, it seems to be. It seems extremely open. It's ambisonic supporting. Multi-channel supporting, obviously not object. I don't think it's an object-based system, but it's clearly aimed at trying to create an open source style of format that nobody really is going to have to pay to decode, basically. Or encode. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, Samsung seems to be the main driver alongside Google. So I can see, a lot of people don't kind of see it as such, but Google / YouTube probably are the biggest streamer of music and video. But it's not a measured kind of playback, so it doesn't become part of any charts, so it's not really counted as a play in terms of royalties. So I think a lot of people forget how many tracks and videos are played on by Google and probably through Samsung phone as well. So so that's quite an interesting take. Obviously headphone supporting as well, binaural. I've only quickly glanced through the documents on it. But, yeah, it's certainly
Could
be attractive to a lot of, well, certainly hardware manufacturers is going to be attractive for, because if you don't have to pay for a license, then you're just going to include it probably and say, oh, we support immersive audio.
Exactly.
But it's funny because, I always think about the fact that Google has had so many decades to at least implement a 5.1 version in YouTube so that you can just put your videos with a 5.1 sound and then just translate that into binaural with people who use mobile devices, and they never did it.
No.
I mean, if they did this, that would be great.
Yeah. I think they did. I think was it last year they did finally enable 5.1 in terms of you can upload it. So they've obviously maybe they're looking ahead in the future, because you can upload 5.1 now. But it doesn't necessarily play back. Yeah, you don't hear it back. Yeah. But I don't know if they're kind of getting a library of.
Well, they should have,
potentially surround.
Well, they have YouTube VR, right? Has like first order ambisonics with an head tracked stereo, which essentially they should have the technology in the background to deal with 6-channel audio.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not that difficult. I mean, lossy audio is so tiny compared to video. I mean, you can just put 16 channels or 8 channels or 6 channels and it's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's funny.
So we'll see what happens. I think that was the 3 or 4 main things I've noticed this month. I don't know about you, Michael.
There's essentially one additional thing that I would like to talk about, and that brings us to Audio Brewers, because they also came out with a new plugin, and the new plugin is a phaser, an ambisonics phaser. And we are going to give it away for free. So essentially 10 people can be lucky and essentially get a license for free, thanks to Alejandro. If you want to get one for free, there are a couple of things that you need to do. First of all, you need to subscribe to the YouTube channel of this podcast. That is at YouTube at Spatial Audio Monthly. And then you need to leave a comment at this episode. And in this comment, you need to tell us what is your favorite Audio Brewers plugin and why. And then Sam and I are going to select 10 lucky winners. And we're going to do that before the end of the Black Friday season, just in case Alejandro is doing a Black Friday sale, so that you can get it at a reduced price in case you don't get it for free. And that essentially kind of brings us to Alejandro. Alejandro, what's this phaser plugin, and how did you decide to do one?
Okay, so there is a big subject in the world of spatial audio, which is like a big difference between spatial audio and immersive audio. I feel that we are missing a huge step here with the Dolby Atmos technology, but just limited to just like mono and stereo objects. Like you can put a mono guitar over there, but it's still a mono guitar. So it becomes spatial, but it's not immersive, So I wrote an algorithm where you can just add a phaser to a mono, stereo, or an ambisonics audio, and then you can alter the phase of its three-dimensional properties, of the three-dimensional properties of the sound, even if it doesn't have three-dimensional properties. So with AB phaser, you can apply just a simple ordinary phaser to your signal, but what you can also do is, like stereo phasers, where you can invert the amplitude of the wave, of the sine wave in one of the sides, so that it just goes from left to right. With AB phaser, you can just go as well from front to back, or from above to below, from top to bottom. And like this, you can just create three-dimensional type of phase sweeps in your mono, stereo, or ambisonics files. It's just like an implementation of immersive audio for spatial audio, like two different concepts just becoming one.
I find the way you approach these things very, very interesting. Kind of the ability to essentially use the different the channels really and kind of work with them. I think you call that impressionist kind of audio, something like that, right? Go ahead.
No, the impressionism in spatial audio, it was something that we clicked on, because I remember that you made a video talking about this concept, and I had already, I was doing this thing, and it was like, I was like, my God, I have to contact Michael because this is like we're at the other side of the earth and we're talking about the same thing, you know?
Yeah,
which is when you grab and.
Honestly, I looked at it in a much simpler way. So essentially, the way you implemented that is actually the correct way, as people would say. Essentially, I just kind of I winged it to some extent. I just kind of played around with it. But the thing that I started to notice is that the abilities that you have by kind of doing it that way. Even though there's a learning curve, right? I mean, it's not something that immediately opens up to yourself. You need to figure out how to do that correctly, right? I mean,
because the thing with ambisonics is that you have to re-understand sound, because in ambisonics there is no left or right. Instead, there is like a sonic sphere, and you have to understand that sound doesn't behave in channels anymore, but in the weight of energy that is happening around your head. But once you understand that concept and you marry it, you're good, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of, I still remember these videos that you put out. And by the way, Alejandro has a number of really, really good videos. Everybody should watch those. I remember there was this one video where you harmonized a vocal, and that was super impressive. I was not able to replicate that, to be perfectly honest. so it takes some skill, but I think if you really have those skills, the possibilities are fairly unique. There's nothing else on the market, right?
Yeah, which is the amazing thing about immersive audio in spatial audio. For example, with this phaser, what I did was just connect my monophonic electric guitar into my sound card, and then you apply this 3-dimensional phaser, and you just send it to your bed or to a 3-dimensional objects. There are some DAWs that allow you to have 3-dimensional objects, and all of a sudden your monophonic guitar starts phasing all around your head. And that thing is unique because it really makes your spatial audio immersive. You really feel in the music, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah. So will people recognize it as a phaser in terms of using it?
Absolutely.
Like the traditional time and things. You will
definitely recognize it as a phaser, but you can hear how the phase moves 3-dimensional in each dimensional pole. Yeah. In a monophonic guitar or in a monophonic voice or a stereophonic recording or whatever. And that's the cool thing about it.
Your plugins are all very much about hiding what doesn't need to be kind of thought about so much, to kind of not simplify is the wrong word. You very much think about how does the user use this plugin to get the sound that they want, rather than just throw everything on the screen and you guys work it out. I think is that fair? Is that fair? That seems to be what I notice about
Absolutely
your plugins.
Fair. Yeah. This is something that to me is like number one. The ambisonics world is way too researcher oriented, and so the plugins are quite complex. They're awesome, the plugins that exist for ambisonics, but they are too focused to people who just do ambisonics and that's it. What I'm trying to do is just bring ambisonics to people who don't do ambisonics, people who do music and to do sound design, And these people don't necessarily have to understand that what is a 7th order file or something like that. It just has to work, So I just keep all that thing and just wrote my algorithm so that it detects all these things and it just works with it automatically, and you just plug and play.
Yeah,
it might give you less control, but you have immediate results.
No, I totally agree. There was I think it was a podcast with the Netflix CEO, and he was talking about the adoption of, or the non-adoption of Dolby Atmos, actually, and how they're focusing more on just delivering 2-channel spatial audio, i.e. binaural and whatever. And he was saying that for it to be fully adopted, it has to be as easy to think about as stereo, because people aren't going to set up with all these speakers, and they're also not going to want to use something that's more complex than stereo because that's what they're used to. So that's always, I think that's definitely the way to, the things that don't need to be complex, don't make them complex for the user.
And there is another thing that I have noticed with Dolby Atmos is that there are too many steps that you have to fulfill in order to actually listen to Dolby Atmos. And it's something that I felt as a consumer when I was setting my studio and I got a receiver that has Dolby Atmos, and then I just connected to the HDMI to my Mac. and I cannot have Dolby Atmos because the HDMI cable, you need the Apple TV, and I don't know what. I mean, what the hell?
You just look on Reddit at people not sure whether they're even listening to Dolby Atmos, yet they've just spent £3,000 on a Dolby Atmos system, and they think, I think I'm only getting surround, and you say, it's not a simple thing to create, and it's still not a simple thing to consume either.
I think that is one big part of the backlash that Dolby Atmos has right now, is that people are just angry that, they spend €1,000 and they're like, oh, I have to spend 500 more, and then I have to spend whatever more just because I need this, and then I need this, and then I need this. Whereas HDMI audio just works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are also a lot of false promises around, right? You kind of you just put like a sound bar that kind of reflects the sound from everywhere, and then you have the full immersive experience. It's sort of this weird ideas, this marketing language that kind of tries to convince everybody that you can actually do that, but in reality, there is actually a little bit more involved. So I see this. I see the in our Discord. That's actually one of the things that people like to discuss a lot. How can I actually hear Dolby Atmos in my actually just today we had like a very lengthy discussion about where a couple of people talked about exactly that issue. Accessibility is a problem right now, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I think a lot of it is. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I wanted to say that this is like, I mean, we have just to face the reality. Dolby Atmos is the thing of today, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, So one of my focuses in whatever I'm doing with my plugins and everything is just to do something that works a little bit timeless, because the Ambisonics tech has been here for 60 years. And when it was born, it was way ahead of what computers could do if there was ever a computer. So it was abandoned. But the truth is that Ambisonics is channel agnostic. So you can have one channel, you can have 16, you can have 100 channels. It all goes, it all works. Yeah. So right now I have like the decoder that decodes for Dolby Atmos. And then I guess that when there is the new thing coming, you will be able to decode your Ambisonics into that new thing. And that is the beautiful thing about the Ambisonics technology. That by the time Nuendo brings out their new layouts or whatever that comes in 10 years, I'm just going to have to just decode to that, and that's it,
And what a lot of people don't really understand when it comes to Ambisonics is, and that's the mathematician speaking, right? So there's actually a very, very clear reason why Ambisonics is the way it is. It is sort of a mathematical, very unique way of describing sound pressure around the listener position. And regardless of how you do that, you always come to the same solution, and that is Ambisonics. So Ambisonics is not something that somebody invented and kind of put together. Is something that essentially develops itself out of the mathematics, and that kind of makes it fairly timeless. So people have kind of pointed out that we know that, and it was not adapted. Kind of the missing link is sort of how to get it into the consumer hands, but the Ambisonics as such is completely timeless, and anybody who attempts a similar thing will always end up with the same Ambisonics principles, right? Which brings me to your something I wanted to talk to you about, and that is sort of, how did you get into Ambisonics?
So, I have always been in love with like immersive audio. I was doing sample libraries for almost 10 years. Like my very first library was just a footsteps library that I did at university. But I always wanted to do something that was three-dimensional, When I was doing sample libraries, in the market that we are in is always like pairs of microphones. So you sample a violin or an orchestra or whatever, and you have like 7 pairs of microphones. You have the close microphone, the mid microphone, and it's always stereo. And I was like, why do you have to make 7 pairs of microphones? And why don't you just make like a surround recording? So when I decided to make audio brewers, I was trying to find a way to just do that, but I didn't want to get into a technology that was proprietary, because I want to think about this. I want to do something that works today but can work tomorrow as well. And then I started reading about Ambisonics. I read a lot about Ambisonics, and then I started doing my sample libraries in first order Ambisonics back then. And then when I was making my sample libraries, when I was editing the audio, because when you're doing sample libraries, you're handling like 50,000 files, 60,000 files. I realized that the plugins that were out there were just so difficult. And I was like, why does it have to be so difficult? If it's something that it doesn't have to be this difficult. So I started developing my plugins as well. So I started developing plugins for first order ambisonics, then I went to third order, and then, with the Fa.7 order in Pro Tools, I was like, okay, I'm just going to expand my algorithms to be seventh order ambisonics, and this is where I am at right now.
Were you a coder before you started this journey with the plugins?
Yeah, I was coding for, it's not coding, it's scripting, for Contact. Yeah. So I was doing my sample libraries in Contact. Yeah. And then, I started coding for audio brewers in C++, and this is how I learned as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay,
it's quite interesting that you say you're not coding, you're scripting. That kind of that almost indicates a certain age, because essentially when I kind of was at in the computer science department, we had a very clear distinction between scripting and coding. But I think these days, kind of the kids are kind of using these terms interoperably. So it's kind of fun in that you make this difference between coding and scripting. It's actually quite interesting that you got into ambisonics. The sample libraries are still available on your website, right? So people can still purchase those.
Oh yeah. I still make sample libraries. I love it because they offer a level of immersion that just doesn't exist. They're more difficult to implement because I am abiding by Contact's rules, and Contact is not ambisonics compatible. So I had to create plugins to make it compatible in Pro Tools, for example. And I had to make my plugins so that they know when they're receiving audio from my libraries so that they work, for other DAWs like Logic. So this is why I was telling you, like, the Studio One thing is just not the first time it happens to me. So yeah, the sample libraries are still available. I still love doing sample libraries. I still have some sample libraries on the queue. They're all in first order ambisonics, but now they can be upscaled with my upscaler, which has been updated, and a big update is coming before this year ends as well.
Cool.
For the upscaler.
Wow.
Cool for the upscaler. Yeah, the upscaler is pretty good actually, and I did a comparison at some point, right? And you kind of have you hit the price value kind of mark correctly. So that was something interesting. You mentioned Studio One. Let's talk about Studio One a little, and I probably should explain that I had a video out where I kind of talked about how to use ambisonics in Studio One. And I made a mistake, and then Alejandro kind of contacted me and said, and it's something that I honestly did not expect. So tell us a little bit about how much effort you actually put into making your plugins work with Studio One.
Yeah, no, it's always the unexpected that happens, as I told you before, Studio One is not the first time this happens to me, which is like some DAWs follow some channel layouts that are not necessarily the channel layouts that are supposed to be followed, but then again, there is not a channel layout that is supposed to be followed. So there is no truth in this. The first time this happened to me was with Logic, what I was telling you before, that I was trying to make my sample libraries compatible with Logic. So I had to make my plugins detect if it was a sample library or if it was a sound. Then it happened with Resolve, I remember. And I was in contact with the guys from Blackmagic, and I was trying to solve it. And then it happened with Nuendo. It has happened as well in the past. And now it happened with Studio One, which is sometimes because there is not really a standard layout organization of the channels, a standard layout of the channels. The channels are not always in the same order, So, for example, in ambisonics, channels are always like from 0 to 3 first order, 0 to 8 in second order, 0 to 15 in third order, etc. And you always have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's always the same channels. When it comes to channel layouts that are like surround or something like that, they go by names. So you have like left, right, center, and stuff like that. But the problem is that these names are not always laid out in the same order. So in the beginning, the problem with the 7.1 format was like you had like the Dolby layout, and then you had the Microsoft layout, which was with the surround channels were flipped, you know. So in one of the layouts, you had like a side left, side left, side right, and then you had rear left, rear right. And in the other layout, it was rear and then side.
Yeah.
And this was the first thing that happened. And then Dolby Atmos came in, and then you have the 712, 714, 716. And I remember that. I don't exactly remember what happened, but this was one of the problems that I had with Resolve. I had to recode my decoders and my plugins so that they could organize all the channels inside so that they just can follow the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 order of ambisonics. And then they can give you back the channels in the DAW order, because I don't know what decoder the user is using. I mean, they could use my decoder, but maybe they use another one. And the same happened with Nuendo, because the layout that is 916, when you have the wide channels, if I remember correctly, in Nuendo, the left and right become center left, center right, and the wide become left and right. And then when it goes to Studio One, again the order was messed. So what I was trying to do was doing the following. I need the user to be able to drag and drop a first order, a second order, and a third order file, and it has to work. But at the same time, I need the user to be able to encode within the DAW, and then it has to work. I remember that when Michael did the video, he was managing to encode and decode the sound, because, you know, once you encode, 0 is 0, 1 is 1, and 2 is 2. But when you drag and drop a file, 0 is not necessarily channel 0. It could be 7, you know what I mean? So I had to learn and follow the rules that the DAW gives me, because I know that if I tell them, could you please reorganize the layout so that they're gonna be like, no, we can't, because we just spent the last year doing this update and we cannot just change everything because ambisonics. So I had to adapt to the DAW. And this is what I did with Studio One. I spent like a couple of weeks, like so many hours in front of the computer trying to learn what the layout was about and how it behaved when it was first order, second order, and third order, the files that you were dragging, because it's different. And then I just had to recode all my plugins so that they could work, but not only that they could work with audio that you encode, but audio that you drag and drop as well. So this is what.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. You know, kind of by the time this podcast goes live, I already have a video out where I kind of explain a little why I pulled that video, and this is exactly what I did. I took a third order ambisonics file and dropped it into Studio One, and then essentially the channels are suddenly completely mangled up and kind of in different places, and that is kind of weird. But it actually goes one step further, and I'm not quite sure if you noticed that. That ended up being the reason why I pulled that video. If you use the SSA plugins, and Peter Stills, I think is his name. I forgot the last name. He contacted me and he said he's actually surprised that his plugins work with Studio One. And it turns out that some of them do and some of them don't. And the reason for that is because it's actually a little bit more complex than that. There are certain channels that certain plugins don't even see because they think they come later. So in one of his metering plugins, 5 channels are not seen because they are assumed to be after channel 16. And so kind of that's why I ended up pulling it, because I wasn't quite sure, does the plugin actually see all 16? Or because as you said, you know, kind of if it sees all 16, it doesn't really make any difference in which order they come, as long as it's the same order for every plugin. But if I cannot be sure that the plugin actually does see all 16, then it becomes a bit of an issue. And as you said, that actually differs for order to order. So depending on how many channels you have, Studio One and will actually kind of organize them differently, which is the weirdest thing.
Wow. So the plugin is, in a sense, aware of the DAW that's hosting it. Then is that true, Alejandro?
Sorry.
The DAW that is hosting your plugins. Your plugin is aware of what DAW it's kind of running in. I guess that's the only way you can handle all the configurations. Wow.
No, but not only that, I have written rules for the DAW, but also for the order, because depending on the order, the channels are laid out differently. Yeah. Depending on the DAW as well. So, for example, in Studio One, again, if you drop a first order ambisonics file, which is a 4-channel file, Studio One will assume that it's a 4.0 cine, which is like a center, left, right, and back. But the problem with the cine is that the back is not discrete in Studio One for some reason. So it's like a combination of back and left and right. So it's impossible for ambisonics to work with combined channels. So you have to put it to music, which is left, right, rear left, and rear right. So depending on the order and on the DAW, the plugin has to follow rules so that the plugins have to follow rules so that they just work.
Wow.
Yeah.
People won't appreciate it, but that you just know that that's a lot of time spent there.
That is a lot of work, and I talked to the developer of Virtuoso, and he sounded a bit frustrated about all of this.
It's frustrating. Yeah,
it's interesting. Why is it that way? Why are there no standards to do that?
Well, I believe that it all started because of what I say, like the Microsoft layout and the Dolby layout, and some DAWs starting with the Microsoft and some others with the Dolby, and then it just becomes
everybody said, we need another format. We need another format to sort this out, and then it's just another format that everybody has to cater for. Yeah.
I had a meeting with Personos because they were kind of curious about what I did with Studio One, and talked to the developer who actually implemented that, and it was quite interesting actually. First of all, these are excellent guys. I'm really impressed by every single one of them. But they were pushing things out without really kind of thoroughly testing them, and kind of the thing that they told me is that essentially there aren't really a lot of plugins they can test this with. So essentially the 9.1.6 layout was not that particularly well tested because they quite frankly couldn't test it. And that is something that I found interesting, that essentially kind of, as you say, essentially we're pushing that layout out, but we don't really have an opportunity to test it thoroughly. And if every company does that, then essentially you end up with like every company doing it slightly differently, right?
But to me, the issue is that if you push a product like this and then all us developers adapt to your software, then you cannot change it anymore.
Yeah.
Because if you do, then you are just screwing all the back compatibility that was created, So you become, you get in a little bit of a problem there, Anyway.
Yeah.
But the truth is that, let's face it, Studio One wasn't made for ambisonics. The channels that we are using are 916, and I'm just using the fact that it has 16 channels to make it ambisonics compatible.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah,
it's not their fault, of course.
It's not, and we need to be clear about that. It's not their fault, actually. They are, by the way,
the truth is that I also came in contact with Presonus, and I came in contact with Blackmagic for the DaVinci issue, and the guys were amazing. They were responding, they were helping me a lot, and they were helping me understand what they did so that I could just go and fix my stuff.
And Presonus is actually, at least that's what they told me, they are thinking about adding ambisonic support. So we will see. But it's sort of a little tricky because the way essentially they have implemented everything in Studio One, they made all the plugins work with the new channel layouts, right? So first I thought, well, that should be fairly straightforward because all you really do is you make sure that the channel layout is correct. But if you want to make sure that it works with all your plugins, then you're running into the issue that you actually need to re-implement everything. It's not like in Pro Tools where Pro Tools simply tells you, oh, I can't do that, right? So it's essentially if you're trying to do something in Pro Tools that Pro Tools doesn't have implemented, you can't do that. But in Studio One, and that's one of the things that I find very unique about Studio One, is they actually make sure that everything works with everything. So all the plugins, they have work with all the channel layouts.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of DAWs kind of integrate, like panners and things as well. Like DaVinci Resolve does it. Whatever format you're mixing in, the panner adapts to that. So I'm guessing that's also a huge factor as well. So
yeah, it is actually more
so
than
many things to potentially not work with something that you're adding in the signal chain all the time.
Yeah.
And the problems with the ambisonic signal chain is that if you're going to encode and decode after each plugin, you start losing quality because you go to the immersive audio and then you just do 714 and then you encode again to ambisonics and then you do 714 and then you encode again. No, the signal has to remain ambisonics for as long as you need it to be, so that it is like good quality, you know, like a proper quality.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you start losing spatial qualities.
Yeah. Well, in the lower orders, you're losing a little bit of the original, a tiny little bit of the original signal sometimes as well. So not that you're going to notice that, but interesting. What a challenge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's but it works. You know, kind of it works actually perfectly. We had in our Discord we had a couple of people that ran into issues. I'm not quite sure why, but essentially it works actually very, very nicely. So anybody who wants to use ambisonics in Studio One, Audio Brewers. Unfortunately, you can't mix and match. That's one of the things, right? So you have to stick with Audio Brewers because you are the only one who actually makes sure that the channel layout works. You know, kind of some of the other plugins.
Yeah, but as soon as another developer does something with the channel layout of Studio One, you can just put it in your workflow. I mean,
I'm just not sure if like the for example the IEM plugin suite, if they ever kind of adapt to different channel layouts, because I could see that as being a complete nightmare, because it was always completely agnostic, right? So they're just having them ordered from 0 to 15. And kind of doing everything from scratch. They're probably not going to do that. I'm a little bit more kind of positive when it comes to things like the SSA plugins or Blue Ripple Sound, because they sort of have a commercial interest in that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, there's always ways around kind of matrixing the channel order, but it's just inconvenience, isn't it? You don't want to be putting fixer plugins in between encoders and decoders just to get around stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and it's sort of it is even those fixer plugins not always work. I used did I use Audio Matrix from Sound Particles, and that didn't. Didn't do the things that it's supposed to be doing.
That plugin itself has to know what the DAW's doing as well.
Exactly.
It might just be making things even worse. No. That was all good fun.
But you know, that is the other...
Sorry, go on.
That is the other thing that surprises me, that, you know, you have like Studio One came out with the Atmos renderer, and I read that Pro Tools is going to do a renderer of their own as well, and I wonder if we will be able to see the three-dimensional objects, because as I told you in the beginning of the podcast, we can be talking about spatial audio all you want, but as long as you have a mono or a stereo object, it's not immersive audio. All you can do to make it immersive is just send a reverb to the bed, but the bed, you have no control over the bed. Yeah. And this is why I love, for example, Nuendo, which is like you can just create an object that is 714, and then you can just send any signal, and then it is a three-dimensional object, and that is what makes music and sound immersive.
Yeah. I think some of the Sound Particles plugins are kind of, you can see they're kind of pushing that way a little bit with their synthesizer.
Absolutely.
What's it called? Something 3D space. Skydust 3D.
Yeah.
Skydust 3D. Yeah. So it's kind of going. I mean, that's kind of like what I love doing, is taking even just stereo plugins or mono plugins, building them into a pseudo kind of immersive thing where each one's doing something slightly differently and sending it to a slightly different part of the room or whatever. And that side's always but it's just so much fun doing that. Rather than just it's just a mono object, I'm just gonna spread it a little bit into 7.1.4 and that's it. It's immersive. Yeah. There's so much more you can do.
It's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, for example, you have the Skydust plugin, and you're making a whole immersive thing, and all you can do is send it to the bed because your object is mono or stereo. What the hell? You know?
Yeah. No, I mean, it'd be interesting coming back to the immersive audio model and format IAMP from Samsung and Google. It'd be interesting. Even though it's channel based, I think it's possibly might allow that to open up a little bit in the ambisonic side of it, I think. So that'd be quite interesting.
I mean, Pro Tools is quite interesting because they do. I think they have started to acknowledge the issue because they have like these templates now that essentially allow you to have a larger bed size. So to some extent, they're already doing that, right? So where you have like where you can actually have a truly immersive 3D object and kind of move it into Atmos by essentially kind of positioning the speakers as objects in three-dimensional space. They do that through templates, so kind of it's a little bit of a routing issue, right? So it really becomes kind of the way how you route things. So you can actually have those templates. So what you're saying is actually quite interesting because that might actually happen. I'm not quite sure, quite frankly, because Pro Tools is always a little conservative when it comes to kind of doing things. But that might actually happen because they have acknowledged the issue. Now, the Fiedler Audio Dolby Atmos Composer obviously also does that.
I wanted to talk about that.
I think you want to talk about that?
No. I wanted to say that Fiedler Audio was the other developer who thought about this.
Yeah.
Make three-dimensional objects, which is the best thing you can do for immersive audio, for spatial audio.
Yeah.
So right now there is just Fiedler Audio and Steinberg. You have nothing else that can do proper immersive audio.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once again, Pro Tools has these templates, but it is a bit of a nightmare because you need to split up the audio and then you need to route the mono channels into the objects, and it's sort of it is a workaround really. So that it's not really a kind of a fully functional implementation. It's a workaround, but it did acknowledge the issue. So we can probably, I mean, hopefully
that gives you hope.
It gives you hope. Well, Pro Tools and hope, those are two things that don't go together.
They've only just got 7.1.4. They're on .2 for ages, weren't they? So.
Yeah. No, but honestly, the last couple of months, I think years probably, they're actually kind of starting to turn things around. I see in the industry people are acknowledging that they can.
Yeah, I think it probably doesn't help that the kind of the workflow in the kind of studio side of it is they're matching to the stereo all the time because they're just converting what has already been mixed in stereo, and then they say, "Oh, we need a Dolby Atmos mix," and so essentially do you know what I mean? Even though they frown upon upmixing, if all you're doing is really replicating the stereo feel or ambience or whatever in an Atmos space, then it's kind of not far off just that upmixing, in my opinion. Because there's so much more you could do.
I completely agree with you.
But to do it, you've got to go back to the recording step and think of it at that point forward. And I think some engineers are definitely doing that now. But I don't think it helps, on the tools side of it, where the workflow is so stereo heavy still, even in a spatial sense. The tools don't need to do much more than stereo anyway, because they're just trying to match stereo masters in the first place.
That's just part of the reality of switching technologies. It happened as well with mono to stereo, which is like, of course, we'll never have a Beatles album in Dolby Atmos that will sound marvelous. It has to be recorded for Dolby Atmos from the pre-production to the post-production. And anything that has been made before Dolby Atmos, you can just, remix it and mix it, and it's going to sound okay, but it's not going to sound as good as the stereo thing. But if you listen to things that have been recorded for Dolby Atmos, like the latest album of Björk, God, these things are amazing,
Yeah. No, I've heard
the things you can do,
that.
Yeah.
Oh, no, definitely. And I think that they're slowly realizing that the down mixing technology is so good now that you don't need to even begin from the stereo master anymore. That's almost the afterthought at the end now. It's just we can just down mix the stereo because it's going to replicate what we've done in spatial quite accurately. So
yeah, and that's how I approach the music I do for the sample libraries I do, is that I don't mix in stereo anymore. I just go Dolby Atmos and then just don't mix it to stereo, because that is the obvious next step.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's when I started, I still am. I use Mac 1 spatial system quite a lot, which is a very similar approach where that the stereo is just going to be usable from the end of the mixing process in a Mac 1 spatial format. So that's always quite useful. I think that Dolby Atmos is very similar now as well. It's like, sometimes just the folding down the stereo to stereo. The Dolby Atmos multi-channel to stereo sounds better than the stereo that you started with. So,
and is that the other thing that sound engineers that have been working in stereo for so many years, they're still asking like, so should I put the compressor in the master bus? No, Dolby Atmos is not like that anymore. It's about the energy of the sound. It no longer is make it loud. It no longer is like that.
It was interesting. The latest Beatles single Now and Then that was just released, it's in a Dolby Atmos version as well. But it's interesting. One of the reviewers, who was I think it was a bit of a vinyl kind of junkie collector. He was just reviewing the different formats of the vinyl, the streaming and the Atmos. And he, even though I don't think he was aware that this is why he was thinking it, he was analysing the waveform of the Atmos version, and because it hadn't been compressed and had all this limiting on it, he said, you can see all the dynamics in the Atmos version that obviously didn't exist so much in the stereo version that he was playing, or the vinyl version. And so he said, I prefer the Atmos version, even though he admitted he was only listening in headphones and probably showing the waveform from the headphone feed. But it's quite interesting. It's kind of helping the lack of loudness requirement in Atmos and spatial audio should help the dynamics, the dynamic range anyway.
That's true.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Well, they're already working out ways to cheat it by putting on multiple compressors on every object, and then you sidechain a stereo signal into that of the main track so that it's all pumping and reacting the same as a stereo compressor on a bus.
Interesting.
It's a lot of process.
I wonder how that sounds in an Atmos environment.
I think they're just a bit stuck in there, kind of, we've got to have a master bus limiter and compressor.
That's something a lot of people essentially kind of get hung up, right? So where's my master bus?
Yeah.
Because you do all the master bus processing, and you're kind of squishing everything down and kind of doing the side chaining and everything.
Yeah.
I think great things are coming for spatial audio, as long as the golden rule is it has to be more accessible for the producer, and it has to be more accessible for the consumer. If there are going to be all these steps for both the producer and the consumer, it's going to be a missed opportunity. But if you make it a bit more, straightforward, and it's better to have 1 million listeners with a I don't know, mid-budget setup than 10 with a 15,000 euro setup.
Yeah.
Speaking of great things, I'm kind of looking at the time a little, so I need to make sure that we're not kind of babbling around for forever. But there are a couple of things I wanted to kind of talk to you about, and the first thing is sort of great things. First of all, in your opinion, what are the things that you are most proud of that you did? And then I also would like to know a little bit about what great things are coming in the future of Audio Brewers.
So the thing I am most proud of must definitely be Vortex and my upscaler.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Because Vortex was like the first sound design tool that was made for ambisonics that I can know of. I'm not sure if there's another one. Because to me, Vortex was a step forward for understanding how can I grab this sonic sphere that is around the listener's head and just grabbing the energy of the sound and creating some effects. But the upscaler was quite the challenge because I really wanted to be able to upscale a signal. Mm-hmm. There are some upscalers there out in the market, but I wanted to make my own. Then I made an update so that it upscales 3 orders above. And then before the year ends, I have reworked the algorithm from the very beginning with a new algorithm that I wrote, I'm very proud of, which allows the listener to upscale all the way to 7th order. Any order to 7th order.
Wow, cool. Wow.
And I am still testing it, but I think it works. and it's going to be like I'm super proud of it because it works really well.
So that's something that's coming by the end of the year, or kind of,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm already interested.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna send you a copy of it. But yeah, the idea is that
you actually implemented your
upscale
own.
it.
Sorry, you actually implemented your own algorithm, so you did not rely on an existing upscaling algorithm, or
No. I didn't rely on anything. Actually, the code, especially the code that I am going to push the update with, which has been reworked from the very beginning. I started the code from scratch to be able to do this 7 orders upscale. It was like me and the computer, and that's it, you know. Yeah, no, it wasn't based on anything.
So that's actually interesting. So how did you approach that? Because I mean, there are very well-known upscaling algorithms out there, right? I mean, kind of the thing. If a lot of people like the Harpex algorithm, right? How did you approach that to create something completely new?
Well, to be honest, the first thing I did was just say I need an upscaler, and I don't want to read any papers from anybody. And that is the first thing I did. I kind of tried a little bit. There is another Aalto University.
Yeah. The Sparta. Yeah, the Finnish thing.
Sparta,
yeah.
yes. They have an upscaler. I don't really know how these upscalers work, because I don't know if there are papers on them. I don't know if there is research on them.
Probably.
So yeah, there has to be, you know. The one I'm working on is definitely going to have a paper.
Cool.
But I am still not doing it because I am in other things at the moment. But yes, it's going to have a paper, so yeah.
So that's actually a real research project that you're doing. That's cool.
Well, yeah, it was a research project that I did, especially because I needed to research that the upscaling was good, you know.
Yes.
So I had to do a research on my own, and the thing is that the new algorithm that I did from scratch it's using the same approach that all the plugins that I'm gonna be doing next year are going to be using, you know. And this has taken me like 12 months of, you know, research this very thing to make it happen.
So do we understand it correctly? So if that essentially means that if you have, like, for example, a first order ambisonics signal and you put a higher order ambisonics audio Brewers plugin on the track, it would do upscaling. So it would actually kind of upscale the signal.
Okay, so for example, with the phaser that you have, all the phase sweeps happen in 7th order ambisonics, even if you put a first order ambisonics file, you know? So yeah, somehow it's using more or less the same type of philosophy. So the processing happens always in 7th order ambisonics. I don't know if you have seen the phaser on the bottom. You have like a light, a full, and an ultra mode. And in the ultra mode, everything happens in 7th order.
So it's like this ambisonics version of upscaling. Of oversampling, right?
Sort of, yeah, I would say that.
That's fairly cool. That's fairly cool. I didn't realize that. Why didn't I not realize that?
Because I haven't talked about it much. But yeah, I mean, I'm so excited about this because I'm working on like 3 plugins that are using the same philosophy that work in 7th order ambisonics under the hood, even if you put a first order ambisonic thing. So yeah, I mean, 2024 is going to be a nice year for audio brewers.
So
sure.
There's a lot that is fairly significant, and you don't run into issues in terms of computing and kind of processing.
Yeah, I do, especially with different plugin wrappers.
Okay.
Looking at you, Pro Tools, where the 7th order processing takes so much. But I have, you were talking about parallelizing in the beginning. I have, in my algorithm, I have created some sort of background thread that parallelizes some of the work in the 7th order ambisonics. So yeah, I have to introduce a little bit of latency to the plugin, but like that, I can split the work that is happening in several threads so that it can come back processed. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
looking forward to it. I am looking forward to it because there's even though I suppose it's relatively early days in terms of multi-channel or spatial audio plugins. There's still quite a limited kind of flavor of them. So to have something like a phaser is pretty cool. Just different things that you can go in different directions with, but when you're mixing and stuff. So there's not even really that many delays that are what I'd say flexible in terms of using in a multi-channel way.
That's actually something we talked about in our pilot episode, right? So kind of no effects, right? No.
Maybe Alejandro could.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of kind of by going through. Honestly, by going through 7th order ambisonics, you get a really high resolution. So that should actually work by just converting it back and forth, right? That's fairly interesting. There was one thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm not quite sure if I should do that towards the end of this podcast, but I'm still doing it. Is there anything that you think you would have changed over the last year? Is there anything that you're not particularly proud of?
No, not really. I'm really happy with the way things are going. I am trying to keep Audio Brewers a boutique company, which means small. I really like this type of thing. In the past, I was involved in bigger projects and everything, and it was very taxing in my life, in the balance. So no, man, I think that the change I did towards Audio Brewers actually made everything better, and I want to keep it that way. I have many projects that I'm trying to push, into to 2024. So I'm not sure if I'm going to still be able to be such a small developer. Maybe I'm gonna get, a bigger team or something. But no, man, I'm happy with the. I'm really happy with everything that has been doing.
You are a one-person team, or do you have people that help you?
I have one person who helps me in the front end part of things, but all the back end and the Ambisonics implementation is done by me. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's way too hard to trust these things too.
Well, just talking about that algorithm, it'd be very difficult to share that between multiple developers anyway. How do you? It's just like it's a brain kind of focus that you just got to. I've come from a computing background and coding, and sometimes you try and work on something as a team, but there's always one person that just sprints ahead and just smashes through a load of problems in one go because they just get on a roll one night or whatever, or one day, and it's sometimes it's a more efficient way to do complex things sometimes.
That's true.
Unless it lends itself to sharing it, but cool. Really cool. Yeah.
Cool. Alejandro, anything else you wanted to kind of talk about?
Nothing. I'm super grateful to finally be able to meet you guys. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Well, thanks for coming on.
I'm a really, really, really fan of your channel, Michael.
Thank you.
Super cool that we clicked.
Thank you. No, I think it was that was actually a lot of fun, kind of talking to you. You brought a lot of insight into essentially ambisonics, and I do believe that you are really one of the most important developers in that space because you kind of are understanding where this space needs to move to in order to make it usable both from a creative perspective, but also from a usability perspective. The fact that you are essentially by yourself is super interesting, and kind of because everything around Audio Brewers is fairly professional. I usually don't see that with single kind of developers. There's always something wrong, but in your case, the interface is just exactly the way it should be. The website is exactly the way it should be. So kind of this overall package that is very unique. So I'm kind of very excited about the things that you're going to do in the future.
Thank you so much.
Definitely. Best of luck.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And this brings us to the end of our podcast, of our first official episode. I think that was a really interesting one. Once again, for those of you who are watching this in video, we're going to leave a link below to our YouTube. First of all, we're going to leave links to Audio Brewers and everything, but we're also going to leave a link to our podcast episode if you're watching it on video on YouTube. Subscribe and let us know what your favorite Audio Brewers plugin is and why. And this will give you the opportunity to get a free copy of the excellent new Phaser plugin from Audio Brewers. If you are listening to this on one of the regular podcast outlets, Spotify or whatever, the YouTube link is youtube.com/ and then that's the @ Spatial Audio Monthly. Go to that YouTube channel, subscribe, and leave your comment. And with that being said, I once again thank Alejandro for joining us. And Sam, any final last words?
No, just say I really enjoyed that. That was just so interesting to hear, from the other side of, what sort of plugins you use every day. And it's always a little bit of an invisible barrier there sometimes with a lot of companies. So it's great to just talk shop. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Alejandro. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And we are going to continue that. So we're going to have guests in the future, and we're going to talk to a couple of different interesting companies. Fetal Audio is coming up at some point, and there are a couple of others as well. And so if you're interested in what we do, just follow us. And with that being said, see you at the next podcast.